Welcome to Redirect, Immigration Law and Perspectives, a weekly, we can't really call it weekly anymore, but it's a semi-regular immigration law podcast. I'm Stephen Robbins, and I'm here with my co-host and BFF, Matthew Archambault. Matthew, how are you?
I'm good. It's almost Valentine's Day. I feel like happy Valentine's Day, Stephen.
Thank you.
Be mine.
Is your gift in the mail? Because if not, it's going to be...
My gift is here in my heart.
Wow, what a gift.
And my heart is yours, so...
All right. Well, I guess I'll take that for what it is. Now, you had a big time hearing today, right?
Well, I had a hearing. I don't know if it was big time. It was asylum. It was, so I was telling you this yesterday, and of course that wasn't recorded, so I should say it again. I spoke to the government attorney beforehand, and it was one of the better conversations, not because she agreed with me or anything, but we agreed early on that we weren't really going to agree on anything other than it being a timely application. And she was polite. She didn't give me the typical, well, it's your case counselor type.
Right.
She just said, the judge is pretty nice, so we'll see what happens. And the judge is nice, but at the end, judges will often say, do you rest? Are you done? And I said, yes, we're done. We rest.
Right.
And she's like, okay, well, I'm going to, because it's late, I'm going to reserve the decision. And I said, oh, well, we're done with our testimony. I could make a closing argument if you like. She's like, no, I'm good. I'm good with the law. I'm like, okay. And she's like, yeah, so I'll just reserve the decision. You should be getting it soon. And I just couldn't take it what she meant. Because part of me was like, oh, usually if we're going to lose, they're kind of big on why don't you make your closing so you can preserve the record. So I was kind of going back and forth, and I emailed the TA, the government attorney, afterwards. And she's like, yeah, it's probably a grant. But I don't know. So we'll see.
Yeah, that's frustrating. I will say you should have stood up for yourself and your right to close. There is this.
Well, I'll kick myself if she denies it, and then I'll be like, and I could have made some points in the closing. But
there is this weird thing that happens. I had this last week, and actually the pro bono case that we took for the podcast, it was granted.
You guys did that,
right? We did it.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah,
you had very little to do with it. It's all the listeners.
Oh, right. The trial attorney started to ask a line of questioning that was. Now, he prefaced it with, Your Honor, I am going somewhere with this, which made me kind of think maybe he had some information that I wasn't privy to, that there was, something I was missing. And so he asked a line of questioning that was getting very, 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 very close to inappropriate. I probably should have objected, but he kept saying he had a reason for asking. And there is this sort of balance where you've got to defend your client and you've got to come out strong and advocate. That's the whole point of us being there. But also, people are funny creatures, and you need really those two people in that hearing to not think you're an asshole. And you never know if you come on too strong when it's not necessarily called for, whether or not the TA who would otherwise be willing to get out of the way might put their foot down, or the judge who was thinking all along, this is pretty sympathetic, all of a sudden he's looking at it a little bit different. So you were probably in a position thinking, maybe she's going to grant, and I could make this really contentious by insisting on doing something the judge doesn't want to do. Those little situations are always a little bit complicated.
Also, I think not being in person, doing the stuff by video, even though you can see everybody, there is this barrier. The human connection really does get lost lots of times. So, because, when you're in court, sometimes you can really pick up on what the judge is feeling, and it's harder, especially the way that they do these WebEx things. It's our faces are front and center. I have to be careful not to roll my eyes too much or anything, because you can really see everything. But the judges, the way they have the cameras, the judges are way back. At least in our courts.
Right. Yeah, we have
and
the
they're
same
wearing
thing.
masks because obviously they're in there with other people. And the TAs and at least the government attorneys are usually where we're at on telephone, so you can't see them at all. So there is this little bit of a disconnect. And it's why, video hearings, I understand why we're doing them. They're not really my preferred way of doing them. They're better than telephonic.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, I had a hearing the other day where it's funny that this trial attorney, he was referencing a refugee interview that this guy had given that's not in the record anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And these are the things that gets frustrating because I'm like, objection, basically, what the are you talking about? Like this isn't in the record.
Right.
Just so people understand, the government can introduce evidence for impeachment, meaning to show that your client's lying, even though it's not in the record that we've never seen before. But he wasn't even introducing it. He's like, well, in this, back in 1997, in this refugee thing, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And the judge was like, I'm going to allow it. I mean, like, what are you going to allow? He's just saying stuff. But then it's this whole thing because it wasn't relevant. Let me put it this way. And I knew it was never going to be relevant. And I also said it wasn't relevant. The judge was kind of insistent on hearing about it. So it's like, okay, like, because you're right. Like, do you really want to piss the judge off in this way? Especially when you know it's just dumb stuff they're talking about.
Right.
So, yeah, so that's a little bit what it's like to do cases.
Now, Matthew, the listeners can't see this.
Okay.
But I have here articles. Do you see that I've actually highlighted things? I've read these ahead of time.
GOP immigration bill faces
roadblocks from both parties.
So
we got a couple of stories. What I'm trying to show you, and what I'm trying to describe for the listeners is that we've prepared.
No,
we didn't
even prepared.
Right. We didn't prepare insofar that I didn't actually share with you what we were going to talk about. But that's okay. So you remember how last week we were making fun of immigration reform because it's super.
So this is just so that people will know. This will be like a typical immigration hearing where Stephen will be playing the part of the prepared immigrant's attorney, and I'll be playing the part of the government attorney who has not read anything.
Who's literally hearing these things for the very first time.
Yes.
Now, look, you might think that immigration reform died with the Build Back Better bill.
A lot of people have been saying that. But
all
over the interwebs.
I was surprised to read this just the other day that there's a new bill. It's bipartisan, which is, of course, super important.
Both parties coming together for common good.
When you're trying to, work on something big like this, you want to make sure you have the people who believe that immigrants are people and the people who believe that immigrants are not people. You want both of their opinions coming together, right? That's really important. So the bill is called the Dignity Act, and it offers a pathway to citizenship. So that's great.
Oh, wow.
Right? A pathway to citizenship.
It probably super quick. Too.
Probably super quick. We're going to get to that. I'm sure it's super quick and super generous. Now, it does, because it's bipartisan, there is some money in there for ramped up border enforcement and language to bring back the border wall.
Yes, well, some people believe that's important.
Right. And also mandatory E-Verify, which is a system to confirm that employers have to use to confirm whether or not their new hires have legal status. And there are some industries like agriculture that are exempted from using E-Verify, but this would make it mandatory.
Except for the industries that probably... Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Right. So I read this and I thought, look, I'm open-minded. I don't want money for the border wall, but at the same time, maybe that money would be sort of boondoggled in some sort of construction project that wouldn't end up hurting that many people. And if the payoff is a pathway to citizenship for 11 million people, then, you got to start talking about making trade-offs, right? So here, let's talk about the oh-so-generous pathway to citizenship. So this would allow unauthorized immigrants the chance to enroll in a 10-year dignity program.
Oh.
Yeah. Super nice name. It would protect them from deportation and allow them to work in the U.S. as long as they fulfill certain conditions, such as passing a background check and paying $10,000 into a newly established fund meant to help U.S. workers.
Oh, so the $10,000, is that due all at once? Is that due when they get their status? Do they pay $1,000 a year?
Well, my assumption is that you have 10 years to pay it. It's not real clear, but the idea is you're basically going to get hit with a $10,000 fine. And it gets better because once you complete...
Whoa. How could it possibly get any better?
I knew you were thinking that, but it does. Check this out. After you finish the Oh So Generous Dignity Program, which is, again, 10 years long, $10,000 in fines, essentially.
I mean, it probably should be 20.
Right. You would be allowed to apply for the redemption program. Because, of course...
So it doesn't end with the dignity program. Then you get into the redemption.
No. Redemption, yeah. Because that's what they need, really. These people, they came here, they worked for years, they paid taxes. What they really need is to be bathed in the waters of redemption after, of course, the 10-year dignity program. By the way, I just want to remind everyone, this is like the good part of the bill. This is the oh so generous moderate Democrat, I guess, should be pleased with this part of the bill.
So far, Joe Manchin is nodding his head in agreement.
Now, right.
Which is all that really matters.
The redemption program would be essentially 5 years. It's a little bit confusing because when you become a permanent resident, you get a 10-year card, but after 5 years, you can become a U.S. citizen. The way this article describes the redemption program is a 5-year term of permanent residency where you would have to learn English, civics, do volunteer work, or pay more into the U.S. Worker Fund. And it gets even better. Now, I know you're asking yourself.
So 10 years to get a 5-year conditional green card?
Essentially, right. And I don't know if, it says English and civics are required for the redemption program. I mean, English and civics are already required for naturalization. So it's possible that they're getting their wires crossed a little bit. But now, you might think that anyone who successfully completes the dignity program would qualify for the redemption program.
Yeah, of course.
But it actually is only open for enrollment if each Border Patrol sector on the southern border achieves and maintains a 90% or greater detection and apprehension rate of individuals attempting to illegally cross the border. So, 10 years in the dignity program, a southern border that's 90% effective in detecting the apprehension of illegal crossings. And then you can enroll in the redemption program, learn English, learn civics, pay more money, more than the $10,000 you already paid, into this worker fund. And then citizenship. I mean, the path is just right there.
Okay, so maybe a serious question that you don't know the answer to.
What a path.
They say 90%. Do we know what percentage do they give the border now?
Yeah, so we do. We don't, obviously it's impossible to know exactly, right? Because if you get in successfully, you get in successfully. But the current estimates have been between 60 to 85% apprehension rates in recent years. So even higher than the highest number we've been able to achieve in recent years.
From your experience, what would you say the percentage of people you speak to have not been encountered at the border in the past 5 years that make it into your office?
Very, very few. Very, very few.
Every once in a while, it's like, really? I'm like, really? Okay. So, wow. So this is like great. So how are you going? Are you already figuring out how to redo your practice to,
I'm reorganizing everything. I've reopened my Build Back Better spreadsheet that I started developing in case that passed. And I've really tried to start plugging in some numbers to figure out who's
seriously though, I guarantee you there are going to be immigration attorneys who are going to be like,
oh, this is a great trade-off. Yeah.
Because honestly, right, let's just speak from pure evil business sense. If they pass this bill, this would be a boon for our business because it's going to be complicated. people are going to have to constantly be checking in. It's not going to be 10 years of just like, here's your work permit for 10 years.
Oh, right. No, and yeah, this bill, I mean, this is like a dumbed down version. I'm sure there's going to be a million different things that would disqualify you from even getting into the dignity program, right?
Yeah, but even like qualifying and keeping yourself qualified is probably going to require a lot of legal work.
Right, for sure.
So for us, so before we, anyone wants to jump on us, if business purposes, it would probably be great.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, but the thing is, I usually tell people, like, we're going to be kind of busy no matter what.
Yeah.
I would rather be busy helping people. Like with Trump, it was a lot more detained work and removal defense, and like they took away DACA. So, I'd rather be helping with DACA and things like that, obviously. But, the funny thing about this bill is, like, if you and I had to come up with a jokey path to citizenship, because we like to joke.
Yeah.
Like, it wouldn't be this outlandish. Even if we were trying to be absurd about it, like, this is insane. The $10,000 contribution to the worker fund, the fact that it's 15 years long.
Does it say how much the application fees are?
It doesn't say. And then also just the fact that, like, it's actually not a path to citizenship if something that's totally unrelated to you, meaning like the rate of apprehension at the southern border, isn't achieved. That's, of course, also absurd. So the Dignity Act, nice little name there. That's going to get a big fat thumbs down from me. I think this would just further entrench ideas that we have about immigrants in general, that they need to be super sorry about the fact that they came here and that they're people who are in need of redemption, right? And that they should be treated as less than U.S. citizens or other people. It's not great.
Need to apply for dignity because that's what they lack. They lack dignity. And if they achieve getting dignity, then they can ask us for us to forgive them.
What's the opposite of dignity? Shame? So these are people they're shameful people, right? They need to go through this process of washing away their shame, washing away their sins, being redeemed. I mean, you've had people convicted of, I'm sure, domestic violence.
Yep. Yeah.
Things that you and I obviously think are terrible, slapping your wife or threatening them or things like that. They've been convicted and they've had to maybe pay a fine of some sort, maybe go to a class, do a couple days in jail. But, something heinous like that in the criminal justice system is usually wrapped up fairly quickly. The fact that somebody came here and contributed to our society and our economy and all those things, what is the criminal equivalent of this type of a sentence? Like 10 years of probation, $10,000 fine. That's like a major drug trafficking felony, right? I don't know.
So the article you're holding up says there is pushback from both parties. I can understand what Democrats may be saying, but what are Republicans saying? You can't reward illegal lawbreakers?
No, obviously Republicans are concerned with the idea of amnesty for unauthorized immigrants. That's very controversial to Republicans. So again, this is just another example of how, like, you're not going to please these people. When Obama was trying to be tough on immigration to appease the Republicans, you could have a proposal like this and they're still going to look at it as radical amnesty. So,
well, I'm going to bring up something to you. I'm going to be the one to read and let you react. And you've been saying some pretty nasty things about the Biden administration.
Me?
You have been not very positive with this administration.
You know that I'm a neoliberal shill through and through.
And I think I'm going to read something to you where you're just going to have to be prepared to apologize.
Okay, here we go.
USCIS changed their mission statement. It now says USCIS upholds America's promise as a nation of welcome and possibility with fairness, integrity, and respect for all we serve. Bam! Boom! Boom goes the dynamite. Yes.
We're back, baby.
Yeah, they changed their mission statement. So what say to you, Stephen? All this slander that you've been piling on the Biden administration, it seems like, yeah.
Well,
it's bad.
I'm assuming the same is happening for you, but for me, approximately 95% of my practice now, and I'm just a solo practitioner, but about 95% of my practice now is answering phone calls about what's going on with my work permit. Because just the basic work permit application, either a renewal or a first time application, which again, for people who don't know, I mean, if I were a USCIS officer should be able to adjudicate this thing. I mean, they might as well do it by Scantron. It's so simple, right? Assuming you need human eyeballs on it, 4 or 5 minutes. But these things are taking now a year, sometimes longer than a year. But the thing is, I've been telling my clients, you don't understand. They changed their mission statement.
Yeah.
And when my client who just lost his job because his work permit's taking an unbelievable amount of time to show up finds out that we've added some good words to the mission statement, it really makes all the difference.
They get a little teary. So just so our listeners can understand, when people apply for asylum, there's kind of a wait time that they have before they can apply for the work permit. And they're in immigration court. It can get tricky as far as being able to get a work permit for various reasons. We filed a bunch of work permits for people who have pending asylum applications. And we have one group that it's been well over a year. We haven't gotten anything. And they're all eligible for the work permit. There's no doubt about that. And then there's this other group. There's this other way, kind of a workaround if something happened where you apply through some group called ASAP. Or,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's because some people don't qualify the traditional way. Those work permits we're getting within a couple months. And they are the same thing. It's the same process. One comes in a couple months, the others are over a year. So now we're like starting to reapply under this other way. It's just insane. I used to do the whole the COVID and all that, and that made sense for a while, but it doesn't make much sense anymore. It's a hellscape in the work permit.
Yeah. I mean, we just had an I-130, which I think I've heard takes a USCIS officer somewhere between 10 to 15 minutes to actually adjudicate. It was approved. It took over 2 years. And, every service request, they just said, oh, yeah, we're working on it. We're working on it. So anyways, mission statements and things like that. Okay, that's fine. You could have easily just not changed that, but fixed your processing times, and I would have been happy. But and the crazy thing about it is too, there's a random group of work permit categories that get an automatic extension. Like they're allowed to just say okay, everyone's just extended right now. Like they could do anything they want.
I mean, they did make a recent change where now certain categories are going to be given longer periods of validity.
Well, yeah, which is great.
Which is long overdue.
So
there are some positive things happening. But on whole...
Not so bueno. I wanted to read this one. Well, there's actually 2 more stories. I don't know. You want to talk about weed?
I love weed.
Are you a weed consumer?
No, I wish I was.
Okay. You guys don't have legal weed out there?
I think we're just getting it now.
Well, let me describe the paradise that is the Pacific Northwest.
I know you smoke every day. You like Snoop Dogg.
It's like a CVS. They're just everywhere. They've got cool names, Slow Burn, The Bake Shop. They've got creative looking signs and advertising, and it's just like
Robin's Reefers.
Yeah, Robin's Reefers. all kinds of great names for these shops. Okay, and here's a story. This came up actually recently for me because I had a young guy who was pro se who applied for a VAWA adjustment, and at the local office they asked him, "Have you ever used drugs?" And he's like, "Well, I use marijuana to help me sleep." And so they asked him more and more questions, well, have you ever possessed more than 30 grams? And, on and on and on. And then they denied his green card because they said, you've admitted to having committed the essential elements of a federal drug crime, which he had because it's still super illegal. And this guy couldn't believe that that was the result, because he's just been going to these shops that are like, again, like a CVS of weed, right? To him, it was all completely above board. He never went to, a shady guy in an alleyway or did anything like that. It was all just the store literally down the street. And this is a similar case of a woman from El Salvador who applied for naturalization and it was denied. And she sued, and the judge in federal court upheld the denial because she and her husband own a marijuana store, one of these stores here in town. She marked on the application no to the question, have you ever sold or smuggled controlled substances, illegal drugs, or narcotics? And apparently she put in an addendum on her N-400, her naturalization application, the answer to this question is somewhat of a gray area federally. And unfortunately for her, it's really not, right? Federally, it's still very much illegal to sell marijuana. And so she could not demonstrate good moral character, and her citizenship was denied. And it's just
so what they're saying is that essentially the citizens of the Pacific Northwest do not have good moral character.
Yeah, pretty much. And, this is just another one of those things that I think, it's obvious that immigrants get treated differently, right? But the officers adjudicating those cases, maybe the federal judge in this case, or all kinds of other people who, hold up the immigration system are going to these shops. They're getting CBD oil or THC oil to sleep or just to have fun or to relax. But if an immigrant tries to do the same exact thing, not only can their benefits be denied, their green card denied, their citizenship be denied, but they could be detained and deported for life for participating in this sort of a new and growing economy. But that's been a big issue out here because I've had a lot of clients who, not a lot, but a handful who, they get their work permit, they come in, they're really happy, and they tell me they got a job cortando la marihuana or working in the legal marijuana business. And I have to tell them, quit your job. Anyways.
So what else?
Well, we do have this other story about EOIR telling an attorney to delete their tweets.
Oh, yes. So she's from San Diego, right?
Monica Lagarnica of the University of California, Los Angeles Center for Immigration Law and Policy. She's an attorney, and she attended these MPP hearings because MPP is back, baby.
Yes. And this is where when desperate people come in to seek asylum in our country, that is very legal under our law, are taken by our government and heartlessly thrown back into Mexico to live in squalor and danger.
Oh, but it's okay. But it's fine, though, because they're going to be scheduled for a hearing.
Well, the part I was talking about when Trump did it.
Oh, yeah, that was bad.
Yeah.
Now it's better.
When they come to the border, they are taken gently and with compassion back to Mexico, to a safe space in Mexico, where they will await their hearing and presume safety. We're going to just presume that they're safe.
So
that's the Biden way.
These people are highly targeted by cartels for extortion and other kinds of things, not just cartels, but police in Mexico. There's stories of police targeting these migrants from all over the world who are forced to wait for their hearing in Mexico. And so Ms. Lagarnica was tweeting about the process of picking up these migrants at a pickup spot in Tijuana, busing them into the United States for these hearings. And there's just all kinds of problems with this. Besides the inherent danger of what they're forced to endure being left in Mexico, but the fact that, they've got to show up at this place at a certain time. People were hungry, all kinds of things about it weren't super clear. They had to either choose to be in a room, I think, with the judge or with their attorney, but they couldn't be in the same room with all three. And then the judges are telling them things like, make sure you update us with your address. And they're saying, I'm literally homeless in Mexico. What do you want me to do? Right? These are sort of the realities that they're facing. They're being told, well, you better come back with a lawyer. And they're saying, I've called every free lawyer on the list of free lawyers, and there's no one who can represent me. Well, too bad. And so she was tweeting about this experience, and then the next day she got an email from UIR, that's the immigration court, telling her that there was a security directive prohibiting the use of electronic devices to record immigration court proceedings, and that she should remove her tweets. Now, the tweets didn't include any video or photographs of the actual hearings. And according to her, she made notes during the hearings and then tweeted afterwards. So shout out to UIR.
I've actually, and I think you have as well. I mean, I've tweeted out stuff about master calendar hearings. Normally it's humorous stuff or things like that. And I've never been contacted by UIR about that. Maybe
I take their security directives very seriously, so I would not do that personally.
And they later apologized, but I mean, this heavy-handed totalitarian type of behavior that we see from the government in the immigration field, just trying to intimidate and silence this attorney, and it's really, I mean, it really is quite disgusting. And shout out to Monica for doing that and for not backing down. I always think like, oh, it's shocking that it happened, but I don't know why I guess people should be shocked that I'm shocked, right?
I mean, it's good that you maintain a little bit of that, because otherwise you dip into a level of cynicism, I think, that can lead to complacency in some ways. So, yeah, I mean, I was hired to do a BIA appeal of this woman who was pro se in regular immigration proceedings. She wasn't in MPP. And she had the help from NIRP, the Northwest Immigrant Rights Project, to at least get her form filled out. And the form is fairly basic, but it's in English, right? And you're supposed to include a detailed declaration. Well, she wasn't able to do that in English, right? She was totally pro se. And so it's kind of on the judge to then flesh out the claim, to determine credibility and things like that. And, I'm sure there are judges that do a really good job of that and that are, really good at giving the benefit of the doubt to these respondents who haven't been able to figure out every answer of the form. There's also like a complex process for completing your own fingerprints, which without an attorney would be, pretty difficult. They get instructions, but they get instructions in English. And this claim was...
Yeah, it's very hard to get stuff translated into at least Spanish in this country.
Oh, yeah. It would be really hard for the court to do that. But anyhow, this woman, I mean, she told the judge what happened, and, he just said, oh, there's no claim here, even though she really did articulate, in my opinion, at least two social groups. It was one of those things, I'm sure, end of the day, nobody's going to read this transcript, right? Nobody's going to care. She's just totally unrepresented. Let's just get in and out of here. So for people like Monica to be at these hearings and to report on it, it's critical, because that's when you see the worst abuses in the immigration system, I think.
Well, one thing for practitioners, Ben Winograd publishes the unpublished BIA decisions. I'm blanking on what his group is called.
It's the Immigrant and Refugee Appellate Center.
Practitioners should know what it is, but he publishes all these unpublished decisions from the Board of Immigration Appeals, which I guess now is going to start becoming readily available to everybody. And it's great. And he does same-day BIA filings for you. He's great. He's been on the show before. And great attorney. But if you go through and read a lot of these decisions, a lot of them are reversing judges in a similar situation where Stephen was just speaking about. And a lot of the decisions from these judges are shocking. You can just tell that they just did not give a shit. They did not care. I mean, there's judges who end up on the BIA, actually, especially from North Carolina, that would just not allow someone to file for asylum because they asked them at a master calendar hearing why they're afraid to go back, didn't like their answer, and said they're not allowed to apply. So these judges exist within the immigration court system, and maybe we should have a show more on it. But now there's a push to make the courts independent, make them Article 1 courts to kind of lock these people in as real federal judges. What Ayla National will tell you, Jeremy McKinney, great guy, who's the president, will tell you is like, yeah, but those types of judges can be fired. Why would anyone think that this administration would do anything to get rid of the bad immigration judges? These things with Biden, these are the things that kind of perplexes all of us, right? That he's not doing the simple things because he could already get rid of these judges. But all practitioners, you should be reading these unpublished decisions. Some of them make you mad. Some of them will make you laugh because they're so ridiculous.
It's also
we need people to start doing better. We need the Biden administration to start doing better.
Yeah, I did want to mention one thing about that. Actually, we had 2 adjustment cases that were granted this week where we had applied for humanitarian parole in place and it was granted. And it's a pretty rare form of relief, but it exists. I think a lot of practitioners don't really know about it. And really, the only immigration reform that was left over in the Build Back Better bill was essentially parole in place, which already exists. If the administration wanted, was fed up with Joe Manchin and fed up with Kristen Sinema, they could say, okay, you know what we're going to do? We're just going to inject a little lifeblood into this pre-existing thing and clarify exactly like who can apply and what our standards are going to be. You wouldn't have to change the law or the regulations, and you'd allow potentially millions of people to adjust status. And so, yeah, there's so many things on the table to be done that would be really, really simple.
Well, I think our time's coming to an end, but I don't want to be presumptuous and say end on this. Maybe you have something else, but it took Trump good 2 to almost 3 years to get his ball of devastation rolling. He had
kind of, but I mean, there was also like the Muslim ban, and literally he changed all of.
Yeah, but they got slapped down, and I mean, he had a lot of like fits and starts at the beginning.
Okay, that's
fair. He was
fair.
Really humming at the end.
Mm-hmm.
Well, maybe if we want to start being optimistic with Valentine's Day coming up, the weather here in Philadelphia is like in the 60s and sunny. We just got James Harden. Got rid of Ben Simmons. So we're all very optimistic here. Maybe Biden, maybe he's just starting to get into it and he's going to start to roll and maybe things are going to start to get better. Because I had 2 naturalization interviews in Philadelphia this week where the officers were polite, nice, and kind.
Strange.
To me and my clients. No, it was very strange. I left the first interview just befuddled because she was so nice and she was approving it and she was overlooking some things that she could have spent a lot of time on. I think she would have been wrong. She's right to approve the case. But past recent experiences, you'll spend a lot of contentious time in these interviews over things that are not all that important.
Right.
But they're trying to make them important. And then the second interview, the officer was kind again.
Unbelievable.
And it was a little unbelievable. So, maybe things are turning.
I love the optimism coming from you. I'm going to soak up all that energy and see where it takes me. But we are out of time. I got somebody coming in. So good chatting with you, Mateo.
Yeah. Let's go Sixers.
Yeah, I guess. I'm not really into sports anymore.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Not really into sports anymore.
8, 9, 10, 76.
All right. I'm going to stop recording now.